Rembrandt and the Boy Who Drew Dogs, a story about Rembrandt Van Rijn by Mollie Blaisdell and illustrated by Nancy Lane. One warm summer morning, a man waited for his son outside of his fine house in Amsterdam. "Titus, hurry," the man called. "I'm coming," a boy answered from inside. The door opened. Out came one small dog, then another, and another. "Don't let Zelda out," the man said. "I won't." 8-year-old Titus snapped the door shut. Few people in Holland had a pet like Zelda. Their monkey would have to take a walk another day. Titus skipped down the steps. He spent most of his time with his nanny, Hendrika. She was like a mother to him. His own mother had died, and his father was usually busy buying art treasures and painting. Today, Titus and his father were going for a rare Sunday walk. His father's name was Rembrandt Van Rijn, the famous painter and etcher. Rembrandt smiled at him. "I plan to walk to my friend Jan's house." He strode down the street whistling. "Come on, Gus, Bobo, Dennis," Titus said, and hurried after his father. Soon they reached the city wall. His father stopped to sketch. Titus bought a pancake from a peddler. He pretended to watch the boats, but really studied his father's sketching. Titus dreamed of being an artist. His father didn't think he was old enough to learn, but Titus was determined. He peeked over his father's shoulder. Lines wiggled across the paper, and a view of the Amstel River appeared. "I'm going to do that," Titus thought. They walked on along a dike road passing windmills. Rembrandt stopped to sketch a few more times. Titus and his dogs played, but Titus kept watching his father scribble, erase, and doodle. Watching his father scribble, erase, and doodle. After a while, his father stopped drawing. "May I sketch?" Titus asked. "After lunch," Rembrandt said. "We're late and must hurry." They finally trudged the bridge that led to Jan Six's house. Jan had lunch waiting, eel pie. Titus wrapped the pie in his napkin to take to his dogs. After the meal, Jan and Rembrandt began to talk. Titus sneaked outside with the pie. His dogs ate with relish. Titus noticed his father's art satchel by the door. He took out several sheets of paper and a charcoal. He tried to draw Gus, but his lines were wobbly. His picture didn't look like a dog. He wandered back inside the house and in the library found some of his father's artwork. One was an etching of the path that led to Jan's house. "I bet I could copy that," Titus thought. He lifted the etching. "Titus, what are you doing?" His father stood at the door. "You said I could sketch after lunch." "Put the frame back," Rembrandt said. "You shouldn't have touched Jan's things without asking." Titus's face burned. He bit back his words. He wasn't a baby. That evening after supper, his father came into his room. "This paper was expensive," Rembrandt said. "You'll spend an hour each week for a month cleaning my studio." After his father left, Titus said to Hendrika. "He didn't even look at my drawings. He's angry, but loves you," Hendrika said. "He'll notice your drawings sometime." Once a week, Titus swept the studio and tried to straighten the stacks of papers. Gus, Bobo, and Dennis kept him company. Zelda was no help at all. One day, while Titus was sweeping, he heard many footsteps in the hall. "Gus, Bobo, Dennis, Zelda, we must hide." Titus, Zelda, and his dogs hid behind a statue. They didn't make a sound as his father began a painting session with his apprentices. "We'll work on our portraits today," Rembrandt said. "Remember, nothing is ugly. Do not be afraid to draw exactly what you see. Bring out the beauty of the natural world." Titus peeked at his father's painting. The girl seemed to glow with life. Oh, he wished he could paint like that. Later, Titus noticed Zelda. "Zelda, no!" Titus shouted. "Titus, take your dogs and Zelda out," Rembrandt pointed to the door. At dinner time, his father said, "This month you will spend an hour each week tidying my artist cabinet. You start tomorrow." Hendrik rubbed Titus's back. The next day, Rembrandt took Titus to his cabinet. Inside this room, Rembrandt stored his private art collection and reference materials. He gave Titus a dust rag, and Titus began to work. That is, until he noticed boxes of charcoals and a bin of scrap paper. He couldn't resist and began to sketch the lion skin in a corner. All month, Titus cleaned the cabinet and spent some time sketching, keeping the drawings hidden. One day, Henri called him to the kitchen for cookies. Titus left his drawings and the cabinet door ajar. When he got back, he found his father and a disaster of scattered drawings. "Did you draw these?" Rembrandt asked. "Yes," Titus said, shaking. "This is good work," his father said. "I can't get the face right," Titus stammered. "You need training," his father said. "We'll start tomorrow." Titus was speechless. "Are you going to help me clean up this mess?" Rembrandt asked. Titus nodded and grinned. Later, his father set up a small desk for Titus in the corner of the studio. "It will help if you copy my work," Rembrandt said. Titus worked for a couple of weeks before he made a first-rate copy. Next, Titus sketched the lion skin. His drawing was accurate, but Titus knew it was lacking something. Still, his father seemed pleased. "Tomorrow we'll sketch from life," Rembrandt said. The next morning, Titus asked, "What are we going to sketch?" "Follow me," Rembrandt said. "Bring your dogs and Zelda." Titus followed his father to the town square. He laughed when he saw a traveling zoo was in town. With quick strokes, his father drew the lion. Titus tried to draw it, but the shading just didn't look right. Even when his father helped him with the nose. "You create the drawing you want," Rembrandt said. "Keep practicing." On the walk home, Rembrandt hugged Titus's shoulder. "You seem so happy today," Titus said. "I've good news," Rembrandt said. "Jan Six has commissioned a new portrait. We've had many bills lately, and no one's been buying my artwork. They said it's too dark and depressing." "Don't worry," Titus said. "No one can create art like you. It's shadow and light. People will realize this. I know it." "How do you know?" Rembrandt asked. "You're my father." Titus hugged him. "You are full of light." For weeks, Titus practiced his drawing. Christmas came, and the New Year rang in. Finally, 12 days after Christmas, his father came in the studio. "No more drawing tonight. It is the Epiphany," his father said. "Why aren't you getting ready?" "I am too old to sing and beg for coins," Titus said. The Epiphany was a special holiday that Dutch children celebrated. An apprentice from his father's art school always carried the star and the lantern. All the children in the neighborhood pretended to be the three wise men. They went from house to house singing songs and begging for coins. "But you're not too old to hold the star," his father said. "No," Titus said, "I'm not too old." A few weeks later, Titus helped an apprentice in the printing room. Titus carefully hung a damp print. The shading and light showed the star just as it had been. He could feel the warmth of the lantern and taste the icy bit of winter air from the Epiphany. Titus called Gus, Bobo, and Dennis into the studio. His pen flew against the page. When he was finished, he looked at his picture. His dogs were perfect, but his careful shading caught just the way their noses wrinkled in the warm light in their eyes. They looked real. His father lifted his drawing. "You've done it," he said. Titus flushed with pleasure. "I couldn't have done it without you." Several years later, Rembrandt called Titus into his studio. Titus was 15. He was a full-fledged apprentice now in his father's workshop. "Titus, sit for me," his father said. "I want to paint your portrait." Titus sat at his desk in the corner of the studio like he used to do those days he was busy helping sell his father's artwork. Titus was glad to sketch for a while. Rembrandt showed Titus the painting. "I look like a little boy," Titus said. "You will always be that boy to me," his father said, "a boy who drew dogs." Titus never became a famous painter, but he did open an art shop when he was older, and he was right about people wanting his father's artwork. People everywhere love Rembrandt's artwork. He is known as a great master of shading and light, and he has inspired artists all over the world. Rembrandt is considered one of the most famous painters who ever lived, though he wasn't wealthy when he died. Today, just one of his paintings is worth millions of dollars. And Rembrandt painted over 500 during his lifetime. Rembrandt Van Rijn is so famous that to this day, people everywhere know Rembrandt only by his first name. Thanks for listening.